I want to talk about 3 reasons why I believe nonprofits are so important in revitalizing and restoring faith in democracy. Nonprofits have basically broad-based civic participation, and that's what democracy is about. Out of many, we learn and develop policies that we believe will further the common good. Secondly, there's no way for most nonprofits to accomplish their missions, whether it's affordable housing, look at the foreclosure issue, whether it's environmental issues, healthcare, you name it, education, without involving government and business. Because government has 2 major roles I'd like to mention. One is they provide resources that philanthropy and charities don't have, simply do not have the resources to solve certain problems. And they also set the ground rules for the market. So the market responds to the incentives and rules that we, the people, the government, decide upon. So where there is market failure, obviously that's where nonprofits also step in. Third, nonprofits have relevant expertise and on-the-ground experience in implementing and solving our most difficult social challenges. So if you're a policymaker, or you should be affirmatively reaching out to hear from folks who are on the ground working on these issues. So those are the 3 perspectives that we bring to looking at the lobbying issue and how it affects charities and other nonprofits and how it affects the democracy and the public good. So we got involved when the president promulgated the executive order on ethics his first day in office. We were concerned because we're trying to understand the purpose. We strongly support the purpose that the president set forth, which was to elevate the public interest over special interest as defined, and that he wanted to restore faith in democracy. Those are the right things. We felt the means that were being used, particularly the restrictions on public service by folks who may not have any financial conflict of interest, which we saw as the core of the ethics issue. Is there a financial or pecuniary conflict of interest? Does this person have such a conflict? And by using the Lobbying Disclosure Act, not for a disclosure purpose, but for the purpose of restricting service, the policy went awry and has been tremendously both over-inclusive and under-inclusive. It's over-inclusive, particularly with respect to charities and other nonprofits who focus on issue advocacy for those who don't have a financial conflict of interest, aren't going to government seeking money, but are seeking to deal with human rights, for example, in Darfur. There isn't that financial conflict does not exist. So it's overbroad in that sense. It's under-inclusive in the ways that Melanie talked about, in that the Lobbying Disclosure Act only covers folks who are doing direct lobbying, and so it doesn't cover the vast majority of corporate executives, public relations firms that work for large companies, and the lawyers who work for large companies, by and large, are not registered lobbyists. You may have your senior vice president for government relations and others who may be registered lobbyists, but you'll find that the vast majority of business executives and the ones that been talked about from AIG to any other company that may have been discussed in the public debate will not have been covered. And so using the LDA for that purposes is flawed. So we looked at what the White House did in terms of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act that was discussed here, and I think I want to praise the White House for listening and for, I believe they have solicited the opinions of folks from different sectors, from different groups, and I believe in the case of the Recovery Act, they listened, and that led to them modifying their policy. So instead of saying it's registered lobbyists who we're concerned about, with the Recovery Act we were talking about money, unlike the executive order on ethics, which applied to anyone who wanted to serve in the executive branch, or many people want to serve in the executive branch, not necessarily anything to do with money and politics. The Recovery Act was about money and people looking for, applying for grants, for contracts. And so what the White House ended up doing was narrowing the scope of time and saying that anybody, whether you're a registered lobbyist, it did not end up basing this on the status of being a registered lobbyist. It was based on anyone who is seeking money from the government. And I think that sets out the hope that the administration recognized that the LDA didn't work there. I'm not, naive to think that they're going to necessarily translate that right away, but I think particularly in light of the Supreme Court decision, which no one has mentioned yet, in Citizens United versus FEC, we see a huge shift in the landscape, the political landscape. And we know that large businesses and wealthy individuals already have a dominant interest in and place in policy and politics, but now it's gone to another level where there is no longer any limits, according to the current Supreme Court, in terms of corporate and union independent expenditures are unlimited now. I think this makes it more incumbent upon nonprofits and both to revisit some of the rules that relate to charitable involvement in lobbying and in nonpartisan voter engagement. I think it's a time to revisit some of those, both the rules and the culture that have held philanthropy and charities back far too much for far too long from having their voices heard in the policy and political arena. And I believe that that there are several sort of democracy reform efforts that we've talked about, from public financing of elections to universal voter registration, to having a strong and independent media. There are a whole range of factors that make democracy work better, and that are predicated on the idea of greater civic engagement. So let me make one on the Citizens United case. I wanted to mention, because I think David Brooks gave some comments that I thought were very interesting about this. He said the political system is broken, and the court's decision will have a poisonous effect on the political environment, that large businesses will have more leverage to seek or protect even greater subsidies for themselves from the federal government, and to crush small business by erecting regulatory barriers to competition. And he went so far as to say that we need to be considering constitutional amendments to fix the system. So in closing, I do want to note that we are close to the birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. And in his famous Gettysburg Address in 1863, President Lincoln made probably one of the most eloquent speeches about the essence and enduring commitment of American democracy, which I think is important for our discussion. He talked about a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, and ended by saying, "We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth." I believe it is now our time and our turn and our responsibility to carry the torch of democracy and restore public faith in government of the people, by the people.